Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester Chats with writer and comic book legend D.G. Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/capesandlunatics. Hope to see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another month of the Chichester Chats. It's me, Phil, it's Lilith, and of course, the man who makes it all possible, Mr. D.G. Chichester.
At least make the title possible. Hello, guys. Good to see you both. Listening to the intro, I think since you offer all these uncensored, access, we need to like make this show much more raw and like.
Nice.
Like, no, I don't know, but just trying to help up your numbers, And
I'm like, man, he wants to curse somebody out. All right. Good.
Only myself.
All right. So, I mean, we're here for, this time to talk. Well, we did Marvel Superheroes #1. We're back this time for another story. That's one of the things I want to ask you. It's you and Margaret Clark on the, what is it? The script. What is it? It's like the script, but someone else did the plot.
Yeah, that's the crux of this whole discussion, I think. I don't know who wrote this, reading, I would say this is the most, I've been down on myself for good reason, when we've discussed some things, where I've criticized the way I approach things, and I think that's all valid. This is probably the most soulless story you guys have set me after. I think, in terms of like reading it. And it's not just because it was, or maybe it was because it was a scripting assignment, and who's the writer on this? Like, who's the plot by? I didn't even recognize the person's name. Like, it didn't jump out to me.
It was Dennis Maloney, Mallone.
So when you scripting assignments would come about, because the plotter, this was back, especially in the day when Marvel was much more about doing the plot, and then the art was done, and then the script was done, which is a great way to work. Because then, as I've said before, you get surprised by what the art is. And Chuck Patton's the artist on this and did a phenomenal job. Mm-hmm. But Dennis Maloney would have written this plot, did write this plot, presumably, and then something happened in between, him writing it, Chuck illustrating it, and then getting to the script part. And that could have been any number of things. Could have been that, maybe he had an illness and he couldn't, or something happened, he couldn't make the deadline, for the script. It could be that the editor didn't like what he did, didn't like working with him. Could have been there was a creative, disagreement about the way to sort of approach it. I can't imagine that's the case, given it's sort of like a just an adventure story without a lot of other consequences to it. So that would have been an instance of the editor then kind of looking for somebody else to script it. So we weren't part of the original process. We would have been brought in after the fact. The editor would have reached out to us, because this isn't even necessarily something you would have gone after, right? It wasn't like, hey, I hear an opening, we want to pitch something. We must have had enough of a reputation, or at least familiarity, or somebody ran into us in the hall or something and said, hey, you guys got a few days to help me script this story. And so it's very much a workmanlike thing in this case, where we're trying to probably help the editor out, because he's under a crunch. Dennis, and I don't know Dennis, so I'm not dissing it, but couldn't make the deadline. Maybe had started on it and wasn't going to make the deadline. Like, there's a number of different reasons when editor would have then said somebody else should script this book, and then would have brought us in to do that.
Hey, you two kids, come in here. You wrote the greatest West Coast Avengers issue of all time. Their greatest
That's
battle. Get in there.
exactly, that reputation was already obviously sort of lighting the world on fire. The greatest battle ever, and people wanted to get in while the getting was good.
So so that's what I was going to say. So that was usually if they brought someone else in to do the script and stuff. So for some reason, maybe Dennis had personal things, maybe whatever. But so this story could have been sitting around for a while, or do you think they turned it around quick? They're like, let's get this in the issue too. Let's get
it could have been both though. That's another reason. Like you just said, that could have been. It could not have been a regular workflow thing. It could have been the project had been sitting around. Maybe Dennis had plotted it. In September. Chuck illustrated it in March. Whatever. They decided to put it into production. Editor reaches out to Dennis. Says, "Hey, we got your story ready," and Dennis isn't around, isn't available, busy with other stuff. It doesn't have to necessarily be a linear situation. It's just that, hey, he can't do it. I don't want him to do it, whatever. And then, you reach out to somebody else to make the script happen. And I don't, have any clue what that was. I don't recall it. I don't recall a hallway conversation. I don't recall like anything about this, like in that way. It was a very fresh read, very interesting, read. I remembered the story. I remembered, I remember Chuck's artwork, but even this, it wouldn't even have been a case of working with Chuck on it, right? Because Dennis would have written the story, and then that would have been illustrated, irrespective of us. So when we saw it, it was penciled at least, and then it's sort of like showing up in front of us, kind of like here's a fresh project. The absolute first thing I ever wrote, uncredited, even though I was foolish and arrogant enough to ask for a credit, and Archie Goodwin told me no, was when was for the last issue of Epic Illustrated, right after I started at Epic Comics, and there was a little horror story in there. I believe it was Portuguese or Spanish language at least, and it had not been translated into English. Like there was a baseline translation, but it wasn't written in a sort of a dramatic fashion. So Archie asked me to turn it into something. Give the English words some drama to carry the story forward. So I did that. And, again, that was sort of like an instance of here's the art, here's the story. You're kind of creating some words around it. But then in that case, you sort of knew what the words were. You knew what the intent of the story was. This could have been an instance, and I don't remember again. And we'll talk about the soullessness that I mentioned at the beginning, where I don't even know if we had the plot. We could have just been given the artwork and said, it's like karaoke, make it up. Sometimes you get the plot and then you at least know what the plotter was intending, or sometimes you get the art and you make it up. You're like, all that stuff about, the father and the lab and what they're trying to do. Maybe that was the story. Maybe we just made it up. Maybe that was never supposed to be the father. I don't know. Could have been anything.
So is that the way it usually happens? Like if someone plots it and then someone else comes in to do the script, where it's like you don't talk to the guy who plotted it, or can it go either way? It
can go either way. It could have went either way. And sometimes I imagine there probably was a plot that we were given, but I don't think we engaged with Dennis on this. There's a comparison where, a number of years later, at Valiant or Acclaim, I think whoever was doing Bloodshot, Len Kaminsky had done 2 issues. I think he was the regular writer on Bloodshot, and again, for certain reasons, he couldn't script these 2 issues, and So I was asked to script the issues over Len's plot and the art that had been done. But I knew Len well, or wellish enough. So I called Len up and I was like, what were you trying to do here? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to set this up? So there's a much more engaged dialogue about, the back and forth or whatever, so there's some of that kind of going on.
So, all right. So you said the soullessness of this. So why do you say that?
I read it and I got nothing out of it. I don't know what you guys.
It was a good story, especially hearing that maybe you didn't get you didn't get to talk to Dennis or anything, and maybe you just got art, and we're like, okay, well, we have to kind of make a story out of this. So,
but it felt very, we talked the last couple of times, interestingly about that Dr. Druid story, which felt very functional, like we were learning our way, and there were some obvious things about it, but there was also little glimmers of, I think, what we would be good at and then I would be good at, after a time, and we were trying to reach for something. Certainly we had the opportunity there also to plot it and script it, and then when we got to the Hercules story, I said, hey, this feels like it's in the vibe, right? The dialogue, the captions, the setup, the pathos, look, I've got books about mythology, there was all that little kind of cueing. It felt very much like, I'll say me and Margaret, when we were writing together, and just me, sort of feels like, hey, I wrote this. This, I don't know who, I just read it and it was like, this just feels like words, to me. It felt very, 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 like just checking the box. Panel 1, check the box. Panel 2, check the box. I don't know why, but they're just the exposition, the dialogue, the setup, the reactions, as a script felt very, very flat to me. I couldn't, if this was sort of, your Coke Pepsi test, and there was just who did this, I couldn't have picked this up and read this and said, oh, I did that, in that way. That was my feeling, just reading it objectively. So it was sort of like, oh, it's a story and now it's over. And that I haven't experienced before, in this time capsule experiment that we've been doing.
Do you think, because I don't know if you, from all our talks, I don't think you've done this a lot. Do you think maybe it's because the idea for this story didn't come from you and Margaret, and you guys just basically came in to help finish the story? Is it?
I mean, that can be certainly part of it. And who is the editor on this? I don't have the comic in front of me.
Should just leave it open.
Hold on, give me a second. Oh.
Hold on, I got
Wait,
it.
now I have to look at the book.
It is. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it's not on the story. So,
yeah, I gotta go all the way up to the top.
I'm sorry, making you guys work harder than you already do.
It's no.
It's okay.
You only have an entire podcast. And,
yeah, no, on the actual story, like it's not. I don't think it's credited on the.
Yeah, it's not.
Listed.
But the book itself. Let's see.
I mean, I know in the first story it's saying Tom DeFalco was editor in chief, but
of course, yeah.
So
Tom would be credited on everything, as editor in chief.
Yeah, it's weird. Like books from the 90s, like when you're like trying to look stuff up, it's actually kind of hard to find sometimes, unless it's like a very well-known editor.
Right, especially on anthologies like this.
Like for the story Cold Feelings, it's Mark Grunwald, obviously, but then like there's some that aren't mentioned at all. So
yeah, right. So I wonder if it was just Mark and Tom for would it be Mark and Tom for the whole book, or would you have different editors?
Probably, yeah. I mean, this probably
it's still like different characters, right? So like, is that how that works?
No, this book would have been probably out of Mark's office, So
okay.
I'm not gonna, Mark was always exemplary. Certain editors could be very heavy-handed, on things, and then you would sort of like kind of quote unquote give up and just do what you were going to do. to kind of like satisfy their needs. Or sometimes editors would drastically rewrite your stuff, and you wouldn't know that until it showed up in print. I don't get the impression that that's the case if this was going through, Mark's office. But I mean, it can be more challenging to, certainly take something, somebody else has done and then try to bring it to life. But on the other hand, that can be fun. Like I said, it can be a little bit of karaoke because you're able to do whatever. Maybe in that page they meant it to be, pathos, but you see, hey, Chuck wrote that in like a really drew that in a very animated fashion, and they kind of look like they're having a good repartee, back and forth between each other. So suddenly you're inspired to write, more back and forth dialogue than maybe was intended in the original plot. And I'd have, I'm sure at some point maybe we'll get to the Bloodshot issues, and I'll go back and rediscover those. But I imagine, again, with Len's discussion or something, maybe I had a good time with that, and I probably was also trying to pick up on Len's voice to some extent, to do credit to Len. But here, no, I don't. I mean, I don't remember any animus, like, oh my gosh, I got to write over somebody else's story, and this would have been, again, a gift, right? This would have been us. We got another job. We got another credit. You don't take that stuff unseriously or try to do it in a way that is, oh, I wish I was on something else. I mean, we never did. Everything was, was trying to build to something bigger.
Do you think it's also maybe just, I don't know, I don't want to, maybe you felt not as in control because, again, you didn't do the plot, you didn't get to pick the character, who's going to.
Yeah, Tigra's a hard character. She's a cat lady. Got a lot going on, like a literal cat lady.
Well, it's like sometimes she's carefree, but you don't want to write a good action story, and sometimes I think she works better in a group dynamic, but
like it's her sick dad, like it's kind of a bummer.
Dad's in danger, right. There's all that, but that's true. That kind of hangs over the story, but I mean, they're all kooky characters, right? I mean, they're all, there's a blind guy and wears horns. There's a, giant green guy, they're all, any character you pick is strange and weird and bizarre. And
cat lady in a bikini. Yeah.
Cat lady in a bikini.
I mean, that helps. The bikini helps.
That helps totally, should have had more dialogue about that, but it just felt very, like I said, to me, and you tell me what you think, because you've read enough of my stuff. God bless you, or God help you. But to me, it just read very like functional, like instead of like something clever on a room entrance, it's like, oh, I'm in the room. Look, I'm opening the door. It just had this audio. Like this audio drama feeling to it of not making use of the space or the character. And who knows, maybe we, as a scripting assignment, maybe it was, hey, we need this tomorrow. That could have been it too. It's not, some things I can remember with crystal clarity. I was sitting right here when we came up with this line. This is like, how we kind of created this character or whatever. But this, this could have been a one of those assignments. Can you guys do this by tomorrow? And it's like, yes, we can, and then you don't have much time to do that. But that's why I sort of say it just doesn't have that, like, to me at least, it doesn't have that feeling of, I don't know, like just verve or like, like a more interesting vibe that some of it suggests to me, like looking at the story and looking at the incidents now, and even taking the downer of the father and, mad scientists and I'm going to steal your genetic construct and whatever. I'm like thinking to myself, well, I wasn't coming up with new lines, but I could say this could be better.
I mean, it didn't immediately jump out at me as a DG Chichester, but again, I mean, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and again, so you think it's possible they could have been like, "Oh, hey, we need this by tomorrow."
That's a possibility. I mean, again, I imagine for these type of anthology books, and I know for a fact for these type of anthology books, you're gathering up stories, not necessarily saying that's going to be an issue 2, right? You know that Marvel Superheroes whatever is going to come out in April, but you're gathering lots of Marvel superhero stories for this. For all I know, some of these stories could have been done for solo Avengers and then never ran in solo Avengers, or something like that.
There's a lot of speedball in this particular anthology.
Yeah, there is, isn't there?
3 too. I'm just like, is this actually secretly a speedball book?
Yeah, right. It could have been a speedball special, which as names from the 80s go, whatever. But it's like, is there a wink wink, or is there just like a, what the fuck? There's your uncensored bit. And it's like,
wait, no, he's in every issue of these. I'm looking and I'm like, no, Speedball's literally in every single one of these.
Yeah, but does he
for 7?
Or were they fascinated with Speedball because it was Steve Ditko though?
Maybe,
or they just suddenly realized they had a glut of Speedball stories and they had to get rid of them. But a story like that could be done in the drawer, not ready to run, and then they suddenly realize we've got a gap. This story's almost finished. We didn't get it scripted, right? We never moved on, and then say, can you do it over the weekend? And I don't know if that's the case.
I mean,
could be that.
I could see that too, because I mean, it seems like this Tigra story is like a bigger page count than like your Hercules story, or even like some of the stories in this issue. So I wonder if maybe was it going to be like for a solo Avengers or something?
Well, that's the thing. After issue 7, it kind of turns into the Avengers show. So I don't know. It's so weird. Just like kind of like, okay, it started off it was one thing, and they're like, well, that's not selling. Let's figure out something else.
So right. I could see that where maybe this was supposed to be a whole issue of solo Avengers, and maybe that's the other thing. They're like, yeah, you guys need to like shrink the page count down. So,
yeah, it's hard to fathom or hard to recollect. Again, the specifics of of that. I just don't. I wish I could. I wish I could have that glimmer of like, wait, that's where that came from, or so and so ran into us in the hall and assigned that to us, or we went knocking and said, you guys got anything? Oh, I got this. Can you do it? But it does have that. The functional aspect of it does sort of have that kind of feeling of like a quote unquote rush job. Not that we wouldn't again do our best effort. It's not a bad story, or a bad script. It's not like nothing made me like cringe, like, oh my God.
Just like kind of an out of body experience. Like vaguely, I remember this.
Yeah, but just like, again, it just sort of felt like, like generic, like it just, like it could be anything in terms of, whereas again, in comparison, the Hercules story, felt very on point to me. It's like, oh yeah, that's, good, good dialogue, interesting bits, and irrespective of the plot, which obviously we came up with there, so we can insert the, the more interesting things about mythology and such. But here it was just that feeling of like, oh, like I said, I'm opening the door. I'm punching you now. That's overstating it perhaps.
I mean, I think it is the anthology thing, and probably was a time crunch, because I think Mark Waid's even gone on record, like when they used to do Action Comics Weekly back in the late '80s. He's like, there are times they were like inking and coloring up until like the very last absolute second before they had to get it to the printer and stuff. He's like, it was such a pain in the ass and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was always there was always time crunches on things, and there was there were books that were colored overnight or over the weekend by 4 or 5 colorists in John Wellington's studio in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Everyone just jamming on that. Anytime you see the very popular inker Manny Hands, is is the whole bullpen, basically jamming on a book. And sometimes you take the assignment because it's the assignment. I mean, Strange Days, James Cameron produced a film from the 90s, like early like VR thing, right? Mystery, not a very good film, but I did that. I think it was a 48-page one shot. I did that in a weekend. The whole
Wow.
thing. From here's the screenplay on Friday. Can you have this for us on Monday? And so that was, and it's a shit comic. I mean, it's, it's like pouring, way too much stuff into too tight container without the time to kind of like really think it through and refine it. And then you've got whatever studio approvals and likeness things and whatever else. So that was jamming it all in. And I think I had to do the whole script and everything in that one. So that was nuts. But and not a very good result as I recall. But
talk about a guy who doesn't get credit. He's probably teamed up with Alan Smithy the whole weekend, and poor Alan never got any credit.
Alan had one good run, and he did a great job on it. Let's give Alan
I know he's still in the Bahamas living off residuals. I mean, yeah.
Some total troll like pinged me recently
no.
on one of the social media things and was like trying to grill me on like the Alan Smithy story, and then and it was like, what's the story behind this? And like, and I was like, at first I was trying to like
CapesandLunatics.
Well, that's it. At first I was like, the story's been told, a few times. You can look here, you can look here, and then he just jumped on like, trying to, and I had issues with the editor, on this, but my issues with the editor were not based on gender, and this idiot tried to make it about that, and I was just, I'm done with this, I don't need this type of conversation like at all. But
let me at the troll. I want to pull like a Deadpool on him and be like, bitch, do you think that's what I do?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I said, Alan, you go look up Alan. He's like in the Cayman Islands these days, I think.
Let me alone.
Living a warmer life.
Man. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Stay Lane Jr.
So are there other anthologies, like obviously outside of like this one and like Hellraiser? Like I think Hellraiser had a lot more fun, obviously. He had a little more control, had a little more in. But yeah, do you like anthologies? Do you think that gives you create like it's a creative puzzle sometimes that can be enriching?
Well, yeah. I mean, you don't. I think if you're putting the whole anthology together, yeah, you get a lot of creative things. I mean, this would have been a story. This is a good adventure, and I didn't have a bad feeling. I mean, this doesn't live in my, my mental history is like, oh, this was a bad experience. And again, even reading it, it wasn't, oh, this is a ton of suckage, right? I can and have, picked up comics that are like, this is fucking awful. And, even recently, I think we were talking about like some horror anthology I picked up, that a newer horror anthology. And it's just like, all of them were just like, this is just bad stuff. I mean, sorry guys, but if you're doing an anthology around a theme and you're part of that could be a lot of fun, right? You're all hitting variations on like a werewolf theme or something, or you're all hitting variations on, taking some kind of ancient myths and making them modern day, or something like that, or everything is around the theme of betrayal, or whatever it might be. Yeah, that could be a lot of fun. But when you're doing an anthology as a singular person, and brought into it, you don't necessarily have a lot of interaction with the other teams that are working on it. You might, there might be a thing where there's almost like a baton pass, like somebody's ending one story somewhere, and then your story is going to be number 2 in the anthology, and you've got to pick up on something there. That's a kind of an interesting construct. you know, the Hellraiser storyline that, you know, we try to do to kind of give the book a bit more continuity, which was the Devil's Brigade, you know, is in essence an anthology where there are, I can't remember how many stories there were, 20, you know, 25, you know, stories that were done by different teams that were sort of, you know, that were all ultimately connected. But Dwayne McDuffie and I had come up with the whole arc of the story, and then and then pass those pieces on to the different teams, and then they had to do something with the characters to kind of do whatever, you know, whatever they wanted, as long as they end it somewhere where it passed the baton on to the next creative team. That was a lot of fun. I wish they had, and I think it turned out pretty well. I wish they had promoted it more when we had done it, and it would have been really interesting to pull all those stories out and then just kind of like, you know, maybe collect them together. Probably no profit in that, but that would have been an interesting thing to creatively to do.
And just reading this issue, I mean,
I was gonna
again,
say, yeah, is there something different you would have done with this one? Like any tweaks you like stood out to you when you're rereading it?
I would have rewritten the whole thing. I mean, you know, we could go page by page. I could probably rewrite it in real time right now, and
like,
you know, better.
would you have thrown out the script completely, or would you have kept something with the father and
I
just
would
had
have.
more pathos to it? Or
There's not a no. You know, I didn't mind the pathos at the end. I don't mind the father is like the idea of like a motivating thing. It's a little maudlin. It's a little like, you know, I'm not going to say you know, Lifetime television, you know, or whatever, but although I just did, but no, with the construct of the story, I would just throw the whole script out. Like, there's nothing about this script that that struck me as like, oh, that's a good turn or that's a good word. Nothing that again stuck out to me as like, that's really like, you know, rank. Um, but nothing felt like it carried energy. And so if this was a blank slate and I was given the plot points of of you know, the mad scientist and the genetic stuff and dad's sick and whatever else is going on here, um I you know, I could take a few hours and I could you know, even go on some accelerated deadline and probably do a better job with that. Uh, Obviously, I have obviously, hopefully, you know, I have more skills now to be able to do something like that. But I could even like look at this blank with no, if I had no concept of it, and just here's a bunch of pages, make your story up again, like kind of,
Mhm.
you know, there's an interesting corporate, you know, fun game, you know, like PowerPoint karaoke, you know, where you know, you take a bunch of random slides and you know, you just have to then, you know, have somebody go through them and then make up a presentation on the go, trying to string together, you know,
That
here's a
sounds like what
puppy.
I do every Friday.
Exactly, right? You know, so but you know, you could have just done that and then just looked at the pages and said, all right, I'm going to make up a story around this.
Do you think if you had your complete choice, I mean, again, story wise and everything, would you and Margaret have picked Tigra, or do you think you guys weren't as comfortable with that, with her character even? Or
No, I don't get any impression, you know, about like, oh, this, I don't, whatever and that's my definition, you know, whatever the soulless, you know, feeling of this, you know, whatever the functional work, you know, approach to this is, or is at least in my mind, in my impression, and a little bit to yours, because you said you read it and you know, it didn't really seem like a Chichester story. Um, yeah, I don't get a sense like, oh, Tiger's a sucky character. I don't want to be writing Tigra or anything like that. Um, at this point in our doing stuff together, anything that was Marvel, you know, a real Marvel character, would have been a nice feather in our cap as it were. We would have been more integrated with the real Marvel universe. To the other Marvel editors, we would have been more real writers, regardless of whatever else we had done, because now we were working with canon characters in a canon-ish story.
Mhm.
So it's again, it's just that feeling of sort of flatness, which surprises me, because that didn't feel to me like normally what we would be doing. And so maybe, and I'm not trying to make excuses for it, but maybe it was a time constraint thing. That I could
So
sort of understand.
so roughly, like what number of the story at Marvel was this exactly? Do you remember, like in the rough range?
No, I don't. I mean, would this have come? I mean, sequentially, obviously, it sort of comes after the Hercules one, I guess, right? But
Right.
I don't know if we had done it, out of reach. But Druid was very early, right? Druid was probably one of the first things, that wasn't an intellectual property thing like Defenders of the Earth or Thundercats or trying to get in through one of those things. Justice was very early, as well, the New Universe title. So, but there's a lot of good things in Justice. There are good things in Druid. Uh, uh, so that's what sort of surprised me about this. And I had been on a podcast with Chuck Patton a few months ago, and surprisingly, he had reminded me, oh, we had worked together on that story. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't remember it immediately. But then when it flashed in my mind, my first impression was, oh yeah, Chuck made that look really good. But I sort of like said, oh yeah, I sort of remember the energy of that story. It's probably really good. I should go back and track it down. But in now reading it, for whatever reason, it just feels super flat to me, because nothing can be anything if you don't put the word super as a qualifier in front of it these days. Um, yeah, so I don't diss Tigra. I don't look at that as a sort of a, oh, and we would never have done that. We would never
Right.
have
No.
approached something as like, oh shit, we got to work on this character, really.
Well, not even
Um,
like that, but like some characters have more of a quote unquote Bible to go by, and some don't as well.
yeah, true, but as you said, cat girl in a bikini. That's not a bad,
Not a bad way to start it all. No.
I mean, you like,
No.
that's, there's no downside, to that. She got good moves. She got, fierce powers. You could play up the the feral qualities, more. Maybe there's a struggle between the cat side and the human side. Like, there's none of that, right? There's
Yeah.
none of
Nothing
that
against
going
the character. No, I just
Yeah.
meant, I think with anything, with anyone, even,
on.
it's just the more things you're given, the less chance you have for your creative juices to flow. Where it's like, okay, here's the character, here's the art already. Before you even got involved, you said the story is already being drawn and stuff. So it's just there's less and less chance for you and Margaret to put your own creative stamp on it. I think it's just, yeah.
Maybe, but I think that, since so much of your, not so much of your story, but certainly 51% or more of your story comes out to the reader through the dialogue and through the captions, and I think we were getting pretty good at that, or we're pretty good at that, with a certain level. And I just don't feel that it was on the game, for whatever the reason was. And I did this uh, movie adaptation for the Fievel Goes West, the little mouse
I love
cartoon.
Five.
I love Fievel too. And so, there we had a little more time and we had a little more breathing room than that Strange Days one. They actually did like 3 issues of this comic, and then they collected it into an all-in-one, format as well. And so there, you know, you've got the script, you've got the screenplay, you've got to follow that. And that was a Spielberg production, so there was certainly some higher level approval things kind of going on. And I had a ball with that. I mean, that I was doing at that point. I was solo writing on that, but which that this doesn't matter that I was writing with Margaret on this, but that I had a ball with. I mean, I you know, there was lines I could pick up, there was lines I could build around, and you know, I'll hold that up almost against anything. Any good Hellraiser story up against Fable Goes West. You know. You know? So I just, yeah, you know, these are one of the things I wish I could, you know, reach back in time and sort of remember. I don't know if you know, Greg Wright might have been like in Mark's office at that point. You know, he might have been Mark's, he was Mark's assistant before he became an editor on his own. And Greg has a much better memory. You know, he might have assigned this, you know, to us. He might have a better memory of like, where did this come from? Why did I do it that way? But I, you know, if I'm going to time capsule things, it's probably better use of everyone's time.
Let's put this on the list. Let's put this on the list. One day we're going to talk to Greg Wright and we're going to ask him.
Yeah, exactly. Like go down the list of like, where did this come from? What's that about?
You know what? You know what? I was going to say, reading this issue, you know who I would love to see you do a story on, whether it's a short story, a mini series, or even like an ongoing run or something. From this issue, I mean, Iron Man. I mean, your love of tech and stuff. I would love to see your take on Iron Man.
Yeah, Iron Man would have been a fun one. I mean, I've used him in little bits and pieces. Obviously, it's Black Armor recently. He got his 2-page, you know, it's not armor. Everything that the entire 4 issues was written just to get to those 2 pages, and you know, I think I used him, you know, 1 or 2 other times, and then I did these cyber comics. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these, but you know, these were these crudely animated digital comics that Marvel did in the early days of the interwebs, and there was a fun little Cap Iron Man story, you know, where I got to write him more directly, and I had fun with that. And yeah, but was
that the thing you guys did for AOL?
Yeah.
Is that the okay, yeah, I vaguely remember that. If you didn't have AIM, you weren't really a 90s kid. Sorry to break it to you.
No. If you didn't have your floppy and then your CDs,
exactly. Your sorry, MSN Messenger kids. I hate to break it to you.
If you didn't get the internet in the mail, yeah, you're
exactly. My internet came in the mail. I'm on the internet. I'm on AOL. Remember when AOL bought Time Warner? It was like, oh my god.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, the world's changing. Yeah, not so much. But yeah, they were released through there.
Yeah, marvelzone.com. It's all coming back to me actually.
Yep. They were called Cyber Comics, and I did I did about 5 or 6 of them, and which, you know, are worth an exploration on their own. I actually like all of those. I think those are all like a ton of fun.
I love that. I'd love to see those.
Shockwave. Oh, because we don't use Flash on the internet anymore. Like kids today, they don't know. Listen, I've been chronically online basically since 1997.
One of the best lines I heard at the South by Southwest technology marketing conference, you know, I used to go to when I was more full corporate, you know, and there was this sad guy doing a presentation. He was like, yes, our studio, you know, used to be the premier Flash development company when that meant something. And, you know, for listeners, Flash and Shockwave were like basically kind of like
powered the internet.
Yeah, they were like they were programming animation protocols, interfaces, and you know, to make stuff happen. I had to grab all those, Lilith, and turn them into crude videos, because I was realizing I mean, those
Yeah, it was gonna
programs are
be
no
a
longer.
lost media.
Yeah, and that's what happens, right? None of those things were being supported anymore. The programs weren't being supported, and then if you update your operating system or update your computer, which at some point you sort of have to, um, then it won't run anymore. So I got
Yep.
to the point where I had the original files from the developer. He'd been good enough to send them to me because I knew how to run Director, I knew how to run Flash, some of the programs that were used to build those, and so I was kind of seeing what he had done, and I wanted the originals in case I wanted to run them on my own from a promotional point of view. But I ended up just having to like turn them into these crude videos to sort of just preserve them. And at one point, Marvel reached out to me, is like, do you have these? It's like I have
For $1 million.
yeah, pretty much. I offered to kind of like, well, let's talk, and I never heard back from them. But
Oh, jeez.
That's so interesting. You Phil, we have to find them.
I was gonna say, yes, find these for me, please. So you
oh,
say
I have. I'll
Cap
send.
and Iron Man. Yeah, I need this.
I'll send you the links. There was
Oh,
there was
yes.
a Cap Iron Man. There was a great Nick Fury. There was a great Daredevil one. There was a Spider-Man one. There was an
Yeah, the
X-Men
Spider-Man ones are,
one.
I'm pretty sure, the ones people most remember, but all of
Oh,
them were pretty
please,
cool.
yes, yes.
And then there was a Blade one, which came out for
Yep.
the movie, which you could just use that Blade one for a Blade movie, because I still don't understand how they can't get a Blade movie. But anyway,
it's cursed. Wesley Snipes cursed it. It's like the professor of the dark arts position.
I will pay money now for the Wesley Snipes. I think the line is prophetic in the movie.
Yes.
There's only one Blade, and there's only ever going to be one Blade. It's like, I don't care about like Ryan's direct to camera eye roll. I think we just need a Wesley Blade movie, and let that kickstart everything.
Was that them telling the audience? Oh yeah, that new one, that's not happening.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, he was older, and it's like, if we're gonna do Old Man Blade, Wesley Snipes 62 and in still great shape. So like,
yeah, what the hell?
Mahershala, I would have loved to see what he was gonna do with it, but yeah, Wesley is Blade.
Or get it, just get Blade going. Like maybe Blade becomes like a thing. Maybe.
But
Blade,
it's also like, I put it to people this way: it took how long to actually get a Flash movie? Like, I literally know there were over like 20 drafts since like the 90s of a Flash movie. So things happen. Things get stuck in developmental hell because people can't see the vision. So
right, and look what we end up with.
Yeah, the second script was the best, with Brian Reynolds attached as Barry Allen, but I'm not gonna talk about that.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, she said instead of that Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern, now it's supposed to be a Flash.
That's what's supposed to be the Flash movie, yeah. And then they wanted to hold off and do something else. So
okay, yeah, because the Flash.
I hope someone got fired for that.
Yeah, well, I think Ryan's turned out in the right place. I don't think he's crying.
He had to be. I feel like everybody is where they're supposed to be. Like, you have to do certain things, and you'll get to where you need to be, where you're supposed to be eventually. It's just part of that journey. That's all.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of truth to that.
So
on that note, I will send you the
yes, please. Yeah, we'll do that for
send you the link.
Phil has a Christmas miracle for you, by the way.
Next month's episode. I feel like I let you down this month. Next month, I believe you will be very happy with next month.
These are time capsules. You got to find them. So what is?
All right.
One of two things will make me happy. Let's see which one you pull up for Christmas.
Oh, I don't know if you see this. All right. Well, we're gonna have not one but two special guests next time, because we are going to do the 90s crossover for Love Nor Money from Terror, Silver Sable, and the Wild Pack, and Cage. So
you're going to pack all that into one. Wow.
Well, we're going to have special guests join us, Greg Wright and Marcus McLaurin. So,
oh my God. Oh, well, I'm going to let
Merry Christmas.
That is. It's sort of like the Island of Misfit Toys. It's like, that's great. I'm the little bird that can't fly. And then I almost could
have contained myself when you're like, yeah, we should ask Greg Wright about that. I'm like, well, yeah, we got
it. Did. You did. That's awesome.
We're gonna get all the real scoop on DG Chichester next month, because his buddy Greg Wright's gonna be here.
Then ask Greg about Tigra. Maybe he remembers it. We'll go off on like a whole other thing. Well, Greg will have much to say about Priapus and all of that strange. So that story was a ball. I mean, that was.
Yeah,
I mean,
6
that
issues across 3 series. Yeah.
Yeah. We had such a great time with that, working together and setting up the baton passes and everything. No, that is indeed a Christmas miracle and a Christmas gift. So,
But sir, I mean, this show is the easiest to book because the minute I mention your name, everyone's like, "Oh, I'm in." Yeah, I'm in. Just name the time and place.
That's awesome. No, they're both great guys. And I'm so glad Marcus is going to be there. There was a podcast that this guy did, and it was a good podcast, but it was he'd invited Marcus on, and I want to say it was like it was originally about like epic, and then it was supposed to segue into sort of more horror stuff, which Marcus had been obviously involved in a lot of the Hellraiser things. But the podcast guy who was running the podcast was sort of getting progressively more wasted as the show was going on, and then in a good way, and just never got to Marcus. So poor Marcus was like sitting there for like the whole time of like, all right, well, maybe next time. And then we never got back to it. But yeah.
Because I plan to reach out to both of them, but I got to Greg first, and Greg's like, "You have to ask Marcus." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm playing." Yeah,
oh yeah, for that. That'll be fun to kind of go back in and
we can actually get a Gregory Wright drop, because we also, every time we mention him, we always go friend of a friend of the podcast. Yes. So now we can finally get one of the drops for Gregory. It's so exciting. I can't wait to see what you three have to talk about. It's going to be such a good conversation.
The biggest Chichester chats ever.
Exactly. Yes. Bursting at the seams. Bursting at the seams. I thought you were going to go with for Christmas. I thought you were going to pull up the Terror Inc. Christmas issue, or the go down the totally inappropriate road of the Hellraiser Christmas special.
But
there's always next year, my friend.
There's always there's Christmas always. It's always Christmas time somewhere. So.
But yeah, send the link to that cyber stuff. We'll have to do that for.
Yeah. Those are all fun. The videos, like I said, are relatively crude. I mean, the animations were crude to begin with, but to capture them, I had to make some compromises. But you get the gist of the story, so which actually kind of, like I said, they're fun. Anyway, we explored many good places, if not necessarily Tigra. Sorry, Tigra, but no disservice to you.
Again, next time will be a lot better. Your friends will be here. We'll talk terror. Yes. All good drops. Yeah, there's a lot of that's going to be fun to go back and spend some time with that story and him in that context. Awesome. Good stuff, guys. Yes. Again, as always, thank you, sir, for
thank you. It's been a ball. And happy Thanksgiving to both of you. If you get together with whoever you're going to get together with, and enjoy the day and find some good things to give thanks for and be grateful for.
Yes, absolutely. You too, sir. Thank you.
All right, folks, enjoy your Saturday. It is Saturday, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This guy, little hellfire.
Now who's wasted?
The day's barely begun.
All right.